I consider myself an advocate, an activist, an ally, a constant learner, and a firm believer that everyone's story has value and that our voices can make an impact. So I experienced sexual violence as an adolescent, as a teenager, and domestic and sexual violence as a young adult. And at the time that I began to experience sexual violence, I was also living in a home with two parents who were alcoholics, and my mother and my stepfather. And it was a very volatile relationship. And as a child, I would always think one of them is going to kill the other. And so growing up around that, kind of on a daily basis, I mean, that didn't happen every night, but the unpredictability and the volatility of that home life, it impacted my ability to develop, to understand healthy relationships, and to trust people. And it altered my worldview. So I think it's important not just to talk about what we might consider single events like a sexual assault or a rape, but also what else is going on. Do you have a past history of trauma? Do you have support people? Do you have resiliency factors? I had a grandmother that I got to live right next door to, and she did not know anything about trauma, and I didn't have to talk to her about trauma, but what she did know is she knew how to show me that I was valuable. And she spent time with me. She was predictable and consistent. In trauma, it's not unusual for us to disconnect in many ways. We disconnect from our emotions, or I did, when I started to numb all of my feelings. I disconnected from my body because it was the scene of the crime, and I didn't connect to it in any way. I didn't think about how my body felt. It was complete disconnect. I disconnected from community and from people because, again, there's a threat there of it not being safe. And I disconnected spiritually, where nothing seemed to have a whole lot of meaning to it. So I started to drink, and I started to drink at a very young age. I started at 11 years old was my first drink. I actually have a little picture of me sitting with my parents and drinking with them when I'm very young. And so I had access, it was easy, and I immediately knew that it would help. And that's why I kept going back to it, and that's why a lot of people go back to it, is because it actually does feel as if it's helping you function and to create this entire new normal. And whether that is to numb or to feel a sense of control, it works. And so I did kind of learn those things, and that was, that's the impact. That's trauma. Or the other way that trauma impacts us is it really steals our sense of self, but also our sense of safety. And so I didn't trust myself or my judgments. I did not like myself. There was a lot of self-loathing. And I didn't trust other people. And there's this aspect of it of wanting to not be yourself. It's hard enough to be a teenager, and you don't have a whole lot of self-actualization anyway, but to be a teenager and be an addict and also be in the throes of post-traumatic stress disorder and depression, it really made it difficult for me to find a sense of self and a sense of self-love. We seek examples that are going to confirm our beliefs about ourselves and the world. If I believe that I'm not a valuable person, and I believe that the world is a dangerous place, I'm going to continue to live a life that confirms those beliefs. And that's what I did from the age of 11 until I was 40. I continued to do things that were self-destructive, sabotaging, humiliating, shameful, harmful. If you think of this spiral, the spiral that starts up here and it's real big, and then it slowly narrows down to something that's very small, that's addiction. Your life becomes very singular, and you're focused only on that and nothing else. So because it's so singular and focused, you don't experience very many things outside of that. Now in recovery, you're going to go back up and your world's going to become bigger and bigger and bigger. And in recovery, that's where you get to go out and take up space, and you get to have a world that is really big. And that is where you heal, and that is where you find resources to help you do that. One of the first things that I learned in healing from trauma and from addiction is that I needed to ask for what I needed. And this sounds very easy to do, but it's not. First of all, you have to figure out what you need. And so that takes some time. But asking people that are there for you what you need in order to feel safe and what you need in order to participate in their services, what you need to be their friend. Ask for what you need. And so I'm going to give you an example of that. I didn't go to the dentist for probably about 15 years. And that started, I think the last time I went was probably when I was like 13 or 14, and then I never went back. And the reason that I didn't go back is because it felt so unsafe. And I learned this later on after researching a little bit, that a lot of survivors of sexual violence really struggle with getting medical care and dental care. And if you think about it, it really is a triggering, uncomfortable experience for people, because you're laying prone in this chair. You have someone that is hovering over you. You can't move. You can't speak. And they're forcing things into your mouth. I mean, all of it is a replication almost of the violence that you might have experienced. So I had to ask for what I needed in order to have dental work. And as a trauma survivor, I learned that I could do that in many different types of situations. Whether you go into a case manager to see them and asking them to let you sit where your back isn't to the door, or that you want the door open, or you want the door closed, or maybe you want a support person there with you. So asking for what you need in order to feel safe, and feeling like it's okay for you to do that. And I've had many wonderful therapists, and I've learned a little bit of something from each and every one of them. And most of them taught me something about feeling and sitting with feeling. When we numb ourselves from feeling, we don't get to selectively numb. If we numb out things such as shame, guilt, fear, anger, we also have to numb out gratitude and joy and pleasure. And so I was able to receive a gift from learning how to sit with discomfort, that I got to start to begin to feel these positive emotions. This allowed me to actually become a part of my life. And that kind of takes me into finding your support system, or your pit stop crew. The people that when you're in trouble and the wheels are coming off, that are going to be there for you to help get you back on track. So finding my people, when really what I wanted to do was to isolate and go away and not talk to anyone. That was also a challenge, but the payoff was so big. So I think peer support was critical. It was one of the biggest pieces probably of my recovery, was peer support. And I found it in many different ways. I found it through traditional 12-step work, but I also, after a couple of years, felt like that was not meeting all my needs. So that would be the other piece of, or a suggestion that I would make to people, is that if one thing is not meeting your needs, or maybe it worked for a while and then it's not working, that it's okay to, take a different fork in the road and go try something else. You don't know what's going to work until you try it. And you are worthy of asking to do different things and try different things. There's so much out there. But through peer support, what I learned was that people can be authentic and they can be genuine and they can say, I love you, and do things that mean I love you. And that builds trust. And that doesn't happen overnight. And there are going to be times when you trust someone and then you no longer trust them again. And that happens too. My relationships are going to ebb and flow. My feelings are going to ebb and flow. I'm going to. And that is all the process of learning and growing and living. And I'm not alone in that. And that it's okay to trust people for a while, or to have a friendship for a while and then not have that friendship. In order to learn how to feel, sit in discomfort, learn to trust, therapy was very helpful for me as well. And I've had many different forms of therapy. There's a variety out there. Some will work, some will not, but you don't know until you try it. One that I had that was really helpful was EMDR, which stands for eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. It's a whole mouthful, but really what it did for me is it helped me tap into the feelings that were very, very deep and hidden that I had numbed for a very long time. And I don't think I would have gotten there without that experience. Another form of therapy was DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy. What DBT did for me is, again, it went kind of back to the feelings of learning how to feel safely. It also taught me to give power to positive emotions. And I think just as human beings in general, whether we have trauma in our past or not, we tend to give our energy to negative emotion. And I think that's even more so for people that have histories of trauma. And so what I learned is that I can give my energy to positive things. That sounds like something very simple, but it can be also so impactful on how you view the world, how you feel, and it impacts your health, your physical health as well. In healing and recovery from trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder, you reconnect back up with your body. And this is also very uncomfortable at first and slow moving. But there's so many practices out there that allow you to do that, whether that's yoga or it is, progressive muscle relaxation. That's one of my favorites, is just to connect with all these little parts, all these little muscles throughout your body, and tensing them up and releasing them. There's energy work that I participated in, whether that was Reiki, whether that was tapping or emotional freedom techniques. I won't go into all the details of those, but just know that there are experiences out there that you can reach out for that are all going to offer something to you. Recovery is also about telling your story and changing the narrative. I'm not happy that it happened, but it did. I can't change what happened, but I can change how I think about it. And I can change how I react and respond to it. And I choose to take it as a gift and use it to do something positive. And I take it and I use it to do impact and to change things that will make the world maybe a tiny bit better. And I think all survivors have an opportunity to do that with their lived experience. I choose not to be stuck in anger or being a victim any longer. I want to, in my bigger world, experience bigger things than that. There's always hope after trauma.